The photograph emerged during the renovation of an old brownstone in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood in 2023. Construction workers discovered a hidden compartment behind a wall panel containing several items from the 1920s, including a remarkably preserved silver-framed photograph. Dated April 12, 1920, the sepia image showed the Henderson family posed formally in their elegant living room. Clarence Henderson, a prominent banker, stood beside his wife Evelyn, with their 2 children seated on an ornate sofa. The family's prosperity was evident in their attire and surroundings: Persian carpets, velvet drapes, and a grand piano visible in the background. When architectural historian Dr. Marcus Reynolds received the photograph for an exhibition on Chicago's Gilded Age homes, he initially categorized it as a typical formal portrait of the era. The Hendersons were well documented in Chicago's social registers, and their craftsman-style home had been featured in several architectural publications of the period. It wasn't until Dr. Reynolds was photographing the image for the exhibition catalog that he noticed something unusual. In the large ornate mirror hanging on the wall behind the family, a reflection was clearly visible, a figure standing in what appeared to be a doorway, observing the scene. The reflection showed a man in workman's clothes, his posture suggesting he was attempting to remain unnoticed while the portrait was being taken. The photographer would have certainly seen this person, Dr. Reynolds noted in his initial assessment. Yet they chose to proceed with the exposure rather than ask the individual to step aside. This suggests the figure's presence had significance, despite their absence from the formal grouping. This curious detail prompted Dr. Reynolds to launch a formal investigation into the Henderson family history and the possible identity of the mysterious figure reflected in the glass. Dr. Reynolds began his investigation by examining Chicago's public records from the early 20th century. Census documents from 1920 listed the Henderson household at 1428 Dearborn Parkway as containing 5 members: Clarence, 45, Evelyn, 38, their children Robert, 16, and Eleanor, 12, and a single live-in servant named Agnes Miller, a Swedish immigrant. No other residents were officially documented. Property records showed that Clarence Henderson had purchased the home in 1915 after a significant promotion at First Chicago Trust, where he served as vice president. Building permits indicated substantial renovations immediately following the purchase, including modernized plumbing, electrical wiring, and an expanded service area, reflecting the family's rising social status and wealth accumulated during World War I through banking investments. Employment. Records from the Henderson household, preserved in the Chicago Historical Society's collection of domestic service documentation, revealed that beyond Agnes Miller, the family regularly employed a gardener and a handyman for maintenance of the property, though neither lived on the premises. The handyman, Thomas Brennan, was listed as working for the Henderson family 2 days per week from 1916 through 1923. The documentary evidence provides several possibilities for the identity of the reflected figure. Dr. Reynolds explained to his research assistant, while not living in the home, maintenance staff would have had regular access to the property and would have been familiar with the family's routines and layout of the house. A promising lead emerged when Dr. Reynolds discovered Evelyn Henderson's social calendar from 1920, which noted "Photograph Whitaker Studio" on April 12th, the same date stamped on the back of the mysterious image. This confirmed the planned nature of the portrait session and suggested that anyone present would likely have been deliberately included or excluded. Dr. Reynolds submitted the photograph to Dr. Lillian Chen, an expert in early 20th century photography and imaging technology at the Art Institute of Chicago. Using non-invasive analytical techniques and digital enhancement, Dr. Chen conducted a thorough examination of the image, focusing particularly on the reflection captured in the mirror. The figure in the mirror is definitely not a photographic anomaly or processing artifact, Dr. Chen confirmed after a week of careful analysis. The reflection shows a man approximately 30-40 years old, wearing work clothes, overalls, and a light-colored shirt with rolled sleeves. He's standing in what appears to be the doorway to an adjacent room, possibly a dining room or study based on the partial furniture visible. Enhancement of the mirror's reflection revealed additional details. The man had a muscular build consistent with physical labor, dark hair, and appeared to be holding something in his hands, possibly tools or a hat. His position suggested he was intentionally standing back from the main room, observing the portrait session while attempting to remain unobtrusive. What's particularly interesting is the angle of the mirror, Dr. Chen pointed out. It's positioned in such a way that the photographer would have clearly seen this reflection while composing the shot. Professional photographers of this period were extremely attentive to such details. Walter Whitaker, whose studio took this photograph, was known for his meticulous approach to formal portraits. Analysis of the light patterns and shadows confirmed the authenticity of the reflection. The lighting on the reflected figure matched perfectly with the main light source illuminating the family, indicating he was physically present during the exposure, which would have lasted several seconds with 1920s camera technology. This photograph captures something unusual, Dr. Chen concluded. The formal composition and the family's positioning follow all the conventions of high society portraiture from this period, yet the inclusion of this reflected figure, clearly not family or household staff, represents a significant departure from standard practice. Dr. Reynolds' investigation took an unexpected turn when he discovered that the Henderson home had been significantly remodeled in 1915-1916 by a notable Chicago architect, Frederick Whitman. While researching Whitman's involvement with the property, Dr. Reynolds found correspondence between Clarence Henderson and Whitman in the architect's archived papers at Northwestern University. The letters revealed that Whitman had been commissioned to modernize the Victorian-era home with contemporary craftsman elements while maintaining its historic character. Henderson had specifically requested expanding the service areas, adding modern conveniences, and creating a more impressive main floor for entertaining business associates and social connections. One letter from Henderson to Whitman, dated October 1915, mentioned specific concerns. The current layout remains inadequate for a man of my position. The public rooms must reflect our standing, while the service areas require efficiency without visibility to our guests. I trust your expertise to achieve this balance. Among Whitman's detailed plans for the renovation was a notation about the living room mirror, the same one visible in the 1920 photograph. The architectural rendering indicated it was specifically positioned to enhance the room's apparent size while offering discrete sightlines to adjacent spaces, suggesting an intentional design choice that would later capture the mysterious, reflected figure. Most intriguingly, Dr. Reynolds found a newspaper article from the Chicago Tribune dated February 1916 that mentioned the Henderson renovation as one of Whitman's significant projects. The article included a quote from Whitman: "The modern home must balance beauty with functionality, allowing the family to maintain proper oversight of the household while preserving appropriate social distinctions." This philosophy seemed to manifest in the home's design elements, including the strategically placed mirror. Further research revealed that Frederick Whitman had trained briefly with Frank Lloyd Wright before establishing his own practice, embracing aspects of Wright's progressive design philosophy while maintaining more traditional elements expected by Chicago's banking elite, attention visible in the Henderson home's architecture. A breakthrough in identifying the reflected figure came from an unexpected source: the Henderson family's household maintenance ledgers, preserved in the Chicago Historical Society's collection of domestic records. Clarence Henderson, true to his banking background, had maintained meticulous accounts of all household expenditures and staff hours from 1915 to 1925. The ledger entries for April 1920 showed regular payments to Thomas Brennan, the handyman, including an entry for April 12th, the day the photograph was taken. The entry noted, T. Brennan, emergency repair to dining room wiring, $450. This confirmed that Brennan had been working in the home on the day of the portrait session, potentially explaining his presence in the reflection. More revealing were the ongoing patterns in the ledgers. Beginning in 1916, Brennan's work hours and compensation had steadily increased, from occasional maintenance to regular weekly work. By 1920, he was present in the home almost daily, with payments reflecting a variety of tasks from electrical work to carpentry and even some landscaping, suggesting he had become increasingly indispensable to the household's functioning. Detailed notes in the margins of several entries provided additional context. In January 1919, Henderson noted, Brennan's work on ice dam prevented significant water damage. Bonus paid. Another notation from November 1919 read, Brennan installed improved security measures on all ground floor windows per recent neighborhood concerns. Economic historian Dr. Patricia Nelson, who assisted with analyzing the ledgers, observed, the relationship between the Hendersons and Brennan appears to have evolved beyond typical employer-worker dynamics of the period. The frequency of his presence, the range of responsibilities entrusted to him, and the occasional bonuses suggest he held a position of unusual importance to the household despite his working-class status. The ledgers also revealed that by late 1920, Brennan had been given a key to the service entrance, a significant indication of trust, rare in employer-worker relationships of that era, particularly across social class boundaries. To understand the unusual relationship between the Hendersons and Thomas Brennan, Dr. Reynolds explored the social dynamics of 1920s Chicago through newspaper accounts, social registers, and community records. The immediate post-WWI period had brought significant social tensions to Chicago, with labor unrest, class conflicts, and changing social hierarchies shaping daily interactions. Clarence Henderson's position in Chicago's banking community placed him firmly in the city's elite. The family appeared regularly in society pages, attending galas, charity events, and exclusive club functions. Evelyn Henderson served on the boards of the Art Institute Women's Committee and the Children's Memorial Hospital Auxiliary, positions reserved for women of significant social standing. However, newspaper accounts from 1918 revealed an incident that may have influenced the family's relationship with their handyman. During a series of burglaries targeting wealthy North Side homes, the Henderson residence had been broken into while the family was attending a charity ball. According to the Chicago Daily News report, the quick action of a maintenance worker who happened to be on the premises completing late repairs thwarted the burglars before significant valuables could be taken. While the article didn't name the worker, the timing aligned with Brennan's employment at the Henderson home. A follow-up piece noted that Mr. Henderson has expressed profound gratitude to the individual whose intervention prevented substantial losses, including family heirlooms of sentimental value. Dr. Sophia Williams, a specialist in early 20th century class dynamics, offered context. The period immediately following World War I saw subtle shifts in rigid class boundaries. While social stratification remained strong, individual relationships sometimes transcended these boundaries, particularly when lower-class individuals had proven their loyalty or value to wealthy families. Research into community records showed that Thomas Brennan was an Irish immigrant who had arrived in Chicago in 1910. He had served briefly in the U.S. Army during World War I, returning to Chicago in 1919 with mechanical skills acquired during his military service, skills that would have made him particularly valuable as households adopted new technologies like electrical wiring and modern plumbing. To further understand the context of the photograph, Dr. Reynolds researched the Henderson family's background and history in Chicago. Clarence Henderson had risen from middle-class origins to significant wealth through a combination of astute banking decisions and advantageous marriages. His first wife, Margaret, had died in 1907, leaving him with 2 young children. His marriage to Evelyn in 1910 connected him to the established Thornton family, opening doors to Chicago's upper social circles. Evelyn Henderson's personal diaries, donated to the Chicago Historical Society after her death in 1968, provided unexpected insights into household dynamics. While most entries focused on social engagements and family matters, occasional mentions of Mr. Brennan appeared throughout 1919-1921, contrasting with the typically anonymous references to other household staff. An entry from March 1920, just weeks before the photograph, noted, Mr. Brennan completed the nursery renovations today. His attention to safety details exceeds what any contractor would have considered. Robert seems to have developed quite an interest in the mechanical aspects of the work and spent the afternoon observing. Mr. B showed remarkable patience explaining the electrical system to him. Another entry from December 1919 revealed, Clarence believes Mr. Brennan's modifications to the home have increased its value considerably. The man has an intuitive understanding of structure that Clarence finds remarkable for someone without formal education. Today they spent hours discussing improvements to the heating system. Most revealing was an entry from April 12, 1920, the day of the photograph. The Whitaker studio photographer arrived promptly at 2. We assembled in the living room as planned. Mr. Brennan was completing urgent repairs to the dining room wiring but assured us he would remain quiet during the session. Clarence insisted he should continue his work rather than return another day, as the dining room lights are needed for tomorrow's dinner with the bank directors. These entries suggested Brennan had gradually evolved from a typical worker to someone granted unusual access to the family's private spaces and interactions, a status reflected, perhaps unintentionally, in the mirror of the formal portrait. Dr. Reynolds' search led him to the archives of the Whitaker Photography Studio, one of Chicago's premier portrait studios of the 1920s. The studio's business records, ledgers, and some photographic plates had been preserved by the Chicago Photography Historical Society after the studio closed in 1952. The appointment book for April 1920 confirmed the Henderson family sitting on April 12th, with a notation indicating it was a home portrait rather than a studio session, an option typically reserved for the studio's most prestigious clients. The entry included specific instructions: living room setting, formal arrangement, electric lighting to be brought. A small notation added, 3 p.m., allow extra time for setup. Most significantly, Dr. Reynolds discovered the photographer's session notes, which included a hand-drawn diagram of the living room with planned positioning for the family and lighting equipment. A notation near the mirror read, "Be mindful of reflections, check before exposure." This confirmed the photographer would have been aware of anything visible in the mirror before taking the photograph. Even more revealing was a contact sheet showing 3 different exposures taken during the session. In the first 2 images, the mirror reflection showed only the empty doorway. It was only in the third and final exposure, the one ultimately framed and preserved, that the figure appeared in the reflection. Walter Whitaker, Jr., son of the studio's founder and the photographer likely responsible for the Henderson portrait, had written a brief memoir about the family business before his death in 1978. In it, he recalled, "Father insisted that every detail in a portrait carried meaning. We were taught to eliminate distractions but to preserve elements that revealed something essential about the subject. A true portrait was not merely a likeness, but a window into the life and character of those pictured." This philosophy suggested that the inclusion of the reflected figure in the final portrait may have been a deliberate choice rather than an oversight, the photographer capturing something he perceived as relevant to the family's true circumstances. To place the Henderson photograph in proper historical context, Dr. Reynolds collaborated with Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, a specialist in post-WWI American social history at the University of Chicago. Together they analyzed how the image reflected and departed from the norms of the period. The 1920s represented a time of significant social transition in America, Dr. Morgan explained. The rigid Victorian class structures were beginning to evolve, particularly in northern industrial cities like Chicago. While social stratification remained strong, the boundaries were becoming slightly more permeable, especially in private spaces. The inclusion of a working-class figure in a formal family portrait, even if only by reflection, represented a significant departure from conventional portraiture of the era, which typically erased all evidence of the labor that sustained wealthy households. Servants, workers, and staff were expected to remain invisible, particularly during formal documentation of family life. What makes this photograph so unusual isn't just the presence of the worker, Dr. Morgan noted, but the fact that both the family and the photographer allowed him to remain visible in this permanent record of the Henderson family. Whether intentional or accidental, this inclusion tells us something about changing relationships between social classes in the immediate post-war period. Research into similar cases from the period revealed that while employers and workers occasionally developed relationships that transcended typical class boundaries, these connections were rarely documented visually. More commonly, such relationships remained private, acknowledged within the household but carefully concealed from broader social circles. The period also saw shifts in attitudes toward skilled labor, particularly as homes incorporated new technologies requiring specialized knowledge. The electrification of homes created interesting power dynamics, Dr. Morgan explained. Suddenly, These wealthy bankers and businessmen were dependent on working-class men who understood the new systems their modern lifestyles required. This technical knowledge sometimes disrupted traditional status hierarchies within the home. The reflection in the Henderson portrait captured precisely this changing dynamic, the physical embodiment of class relationships in transition, where a worker could be simultaneously present and separate, acknowledged yet distinct. Through extensive research across multiple archives, Dr. Reynolds gradually pieced together the story of Thomas Brennan and his unusual relationship with the Henderson family. City directories, employment records, and personal papers revealed that what began as occasional maintenance work evolved into something more significant over the years following the 1920 photograph. By 1922, Henderson household records showed that a small apartment had been created above the garage for Brennan, allowing him to live on the property, an unusual arrangement that blurred the line between employee and household member. When Robert Henderson departed for college that same year, entries in Evelyn's diary mentioned Robert corresponding regularly with Mr. B about mechanical problems in his dormitory. The most significant development came in 1924, when Clarence Henderson established a small electrical contracting business specializing in home modernization. Business registration documents listed Thomas Brennan as the operations manager, with Henderson providing the financial backing. This venture, Henderson and Brennan Electric, represented a remarkable crossing of class boundaries, with Brennan's technical expertise complementing Henderson's capital and business connections. A profile of the business in a 1926 trade publication noted, "The unique partnership brings together financial acumen and practical knowledge, allowing the firm to bridge the gap between luxury expectations and technical realities in Chicago's finest homes." The article included a photograph of Henderson and Brennan standing side by side outside their office, a public acknowledgement of their professional relationship. Most revealing was a letter found in Eleanor Henderson's papers after her death in 1985. Writing to her brother in 1970, she reflected, "Father always said his best business decision was recognizing Mr. Brennan's potential that day he came to fix our radiator. Mother society friends never understood why Father would partner with our handyman, but their business supported both families through the Depression when so many of the bank men lost everything." When Dr. Reynolds finally located Brennan's descendants, they shared family stories that had been passed down through generations. "My grandfather always spoke of Mr. Henderson with great respect," Thomas Brennan's grandson recalled. "He said Henderson was different from other wealthy men. He judged people by their character and abilities, not their background." That photograph where Grandpa appears in the mirror hung in his workshop all his life. He called it the moment he became visible.